stretch up quite a bit to reach it. So my talk will have three sections. In the first, I'm going to talk about small donors in the presidential elections. In the second, I'll use state data, mostly New York, to talk about the potential role for policy reform, including public financing. And then in the third, I'll present my views about the three draft bills that the Senate was discussing yesterday. The year 2008 was a real turning point in the way many people think about money in politics. Suddenly, the role of the small donor or the internet were dominating the public conversation. Much of the reason, of course, for that stems from the spectacular success of the Obama campaign's fundraising. There is no doubt in my mind that after Obama, the campaign finance debate has reached an important turning point. Many of the substantive issues are the same. They will continue to be here, but they're being framed differently. And I've been writing professionally about the subject for 35 years, and for most of that time, the main conversation has been about reducing corruption or the appearance of corruption. And the main tools that have been used to serve those ends have been to limit contributions and spending. It has become clear, painfully clear to some, joyfully clear to others, but clear that there are limits to what you can do with limits. I support contribution limits, but putting limits on contributions or on spending by candidates does not and cannot limit spending by other groups, independent spending by other groups, including all of that kind of spending that doesn't quite make it into the definitions of election law. But the real problem with the nearly exclusive focus on limits, in my mind, is not these problems of getting around things and so forth. The real problem, in my mind, has been that it's forced a kind of tunnel vision on the debate. The goals served by limits have been defined primarily in terms of what people are trying to prevent because of the corruption, the appearance of corruption. And when my organization, the Campaign Finance Institute, wanted to start something called the Small Donor Project, we wanted to turn that focus, change the focus, away from the bad things you're trying to prevent, toward thinking about what are you trying to accomplish, what are the positive goals you're trying to accomplish. Now, political scientists typically talk about a broad range of goals, which I've organized for the sake of simplicity, and the letter C 4 times over, 4 C's. Competition, candidate emergence, and citizen participation, as well as corruption. And of those 4, the work we've been doing is focused on citizen participation, specifically on promoting equality through enhanced participation. Equality, or getting to more equality, in my view, requires a lot more than squeezing down at the top. It specifically requires getting people in at the bottom. Now, I say we suspected that you could actually do this and that was the key. But the key word there is that we suspected. There's a lot we didn't know, so we spent a few years with a 3-part research agenda that asked the following. 1, is there really enough of a difference between small and large donors for us to care whether there are more of them? The answer from the survey research was yes, there's a lot of difference, but I'm not going to take your time on that. Second, you can ask about it if you want. Second, assuming they are different, is it plausible to imagine a large enough increase to make a difference in the system? Third, is there an important role for policy to play in encouraging that increase in participation? Or, and this is the first question I'm going to present and use the tables for, or does the internet success of candidates such as Howard Dean, Barack Obama, mean that the issue is going to take care of itself? Is technology alone enough? To get at that question, is the internet alone enough? Let's just look at what happened this year. Let's look at a little bit of data. Trust me, if you want more, I've got tons more. Write to me, you can have it. But let's just do this one for start. This lists the major. Okay, which one is it? These are the major presidential candidates, and all the way to the right. This column. tells you, these left columns tell you about the contributions that they received. This is the number that was reported most often during the campaign. And as you can see from this, Barack Obama received 49% of his money in contributions of $200 or less, Hillary Clinton 33%, and so forth. You can go down the list. And an awful lot of the entire financial difference between Obama and Clinton comes from those under $200 contributions, and was really instrumental in his winning. To the right, you have another way of looking at the numbers. The left, as I say, is number of transactions, and that's the one that the campaign kept putting out every month. To the right is, we decided to go through what was rather a monumental effort, and Blair's done it for his organization in the States. We know how monumental it is. Try to figure out when two people named John J. Smith and John Smith were the same person, for example, collapsing contributions into one donor. So we know how much came from donors who aggregated to a certain amount. And here, it looks as if, not looks as if, it is a fact, that Obama received 26% of his money from people who aggregated to $200 or less. Clinton to 16, and so forth down the line. I assume that you can read the numbers from anywhere in this room, and if not, tell me if you want to know one. Now, so the difference between these two is that Obama had an unusually large number of people who gave more than once. They were enthusiastic for him. They gave, say, $50 or $100, but they did it more than once. And people who got over the 200 mark averaged about 500 for the repeaters for Obama. And to me, that's all to the good. These are people who got committed in the activist corps. They were the volunteers. Nothing, I mean, it's something to be proud of. But still, there's this difference between 49 and 26, and in fact, the Obama General Counsel got really upset at me for pointing out this number, and is still talks about it in public. Why do I bother bringing it up? Why do I put it up on the chart? Why do we do the work? To me, the two numbers answer two different kinds of questions. They tell you two different kinds of things. People who aggregate their money up to $500 are not buying influence or access to a president. They are. So these numbers on the left tell you something if what you want to know about is the candidate bought and paid for by somebody. But if you want to know something different, if you want to know if how many people are engaged in the process, if you want to know whether the campaign is going to reach down to average people, or to what level of average people, if you want to know how far down the economic ladder it's gone, the other one is the number you want. And the answer is he got a pretty fair number of people. And this year, at all federal elections combined, party and president especially, you got about 3% of people giving. That's good. And Obama's numbers are impressive compared to other presidential candidates. But when I look at them, compared to a vision of what I'd like to see for participation as a whole among people, I'd like to see more. And that's what the number tells me, or helps me see. Now, these are the best numbers on the federal level. If you look at House races, if you want to know, is this something that's automatically going to filter down? Congressional candidates get 8% of their money from people who aggregate to 200 or less. Incumbents get 6%. Senate candidates, it's 15% or 10% from the incumbents. So obviously, first of all, incumbents don't need to go to all the work of reaching down. Second, more visibility means you're more likely to be able to reach the small donors. It takes visibility to get to small donors. And that point about visibility is explained even better if you look at this timing chart. This is, we're back to contributions rather than aggregated donors, but when did candidates get what level of contributions? In the first 9 months of the campaign, those are the months when Obama established himself as the alternative to Clinton. In the first 9 months, Obama got 28% of his money in contributions of 200 or less. Not 49, which is what he got overall, not 62 at the end, but 28. Again, is that bad? No, it's just a fact. And what the fact is that you don't get to do very much small donor mass outreach until you have visibility and until you're credible. You need some kind of a launching pad. So I don't think the Obama phenomenon will be replicated that easily, especially in lower down races. So then the next question is, if I don't believe it, and I think there was something good going on, are there effective ways for policy perhaps to help promote participation? So to help address those questions, I'm going to turn to some of the work campaign finance institutes have been doing in the States. In the next figures, I use bar charts because we aggregate all people. We're not just talking one candidate, we're doing all candidates. But it's the same basic kind of information. People congregate contributions or donors who aggregate to a certain level. And this is New York State. Donors who aggregated to $0 to $100, 2% of the money came from those people. 101 to 250, another 1%. This is party 1,000 or more, 40%. Party money 13, non-party organizations 39. In other words, in here, this is well below the level. These are all races combined in New York. Well below the level of House incumbents, about half. As a matter of fact, New York, of the 40-some-odd states we've done so far, New York is second from the bottom in amount of money from the small donors. But in general, most of the states have this kind of shape. And anyway, let me just give you one more number before I move to the in general point. Approximately 1/2 of 1%, that's our estimate, including the anonymized donors, 1/2 of 1% of the people in the state of New York gave any money to any state candidate in the 2006 election when the governor was up. That means 99.5% gave nothing.
Is that just gubernatorial election?
No, all state offices. State offices. Legislature, constitutional offices, combined. Now here's what the chart looks like in Minnesota. Rather different shape to the chart. Well, why is that? A lot of people first reaction say, well, you know, they're kind of different in Minnesota. Different political culture. We know that from all of those political culture books. But you know what? They're not that different from their immediate neighboring states. And the immediate neighboring states have charts whose shape looks like New York. No, that just won't work. I mean, why should Minnesota be so different from Iowa, North Dakota, Wisconsin? So that won't work. What they do have are laws that are different, in at least 3 different ways. They have low contribution limits, or modest contribution limits. They have half of the money is from public funding, and what I think is terribly important, they give a $50 rebate to people who give contributions. So we wanted to ask, could you make the shape of the bars look a little bit more like Minnesota's just by jiggling the public policy around? You can decide whether you like the specific policy choice or not. That's the question we asked. Could you do it? And we're putting on an online tool that will let you play with the policy options for all of the states. And when you do that, we have 3 basic kinds of options: contribution limits, matching funds of 3 for 1 or 5 for 1 for the first $50, or some combination of things, just increasing participation up to 3%, which is half of the level of Minnesota, and which is about the level that did party plus presidency this year, not an unrealistic number. When you go to that tool, you'll be able to work through each of the dozen choices separately. I'm not going to bother with that. I'm just going to show you, first of all, I'll show you what the New York Assembly bill would do, the one that's been filed. Here's what the chart would look like for the New York Assembly bill. It's a significant change. It gets the small donors up to about U.S. Senate level. So you go back and forth. There's, now and the Assembly bill, which is a matching fund bill, matches the first $250, and it has contribution limits of $2,000. But if you were to put all of the three changes I talked about in at once, and this is the most spectacular chart of all, and I'm not necessarily saying this is the way you have to go, but this is the matching fund plus contribution limit plus get 3% of the people get $50. That's what it looks like. That's New York. I don't think that's an unrealistic goal, by the way, to get 3% of the people into the system. That still means 97% not. And we're talking about 3% in at the level of $50, not at the level of $500. So it turns out that building up from the bottom can have a huge impact. And by the way, this is not, all of those things together, you still have more money in the system than now. All of the money is replaced. It's not as if candidates are going to be starving. It's not as if competition is going to be dried up. It turns out that it can have huge impact, and public policy could make a difference, including the policies that are directly aimed at stimulating participation. So those are the key lessons. One, policies do matter. Two, there's more than one way to further a goal. This doesn't necessarily have to be the end goal. There are a lot of ways to move you toward a goal of greater participation. It's not all about there's only one reform that's right. And of course, with any of them, you have to look at side effects. I would argue, when I'm looking at goals, so one of the key goals is to get more people involved. More small donors means more volunteers. We have good reason to believe that there's feedback between volunteering and being a small donor. I just think that's frankly very healthy for democracy. So having said that as my baseline, what do I care about? I'm going to get to the final topic, which is just a few comments on the three bills that the Senate and New York Senate is looking at. All three of the public financing bills provide public resources to candidates. I think that's helpful. I think that's good. But I think each of them suffers from one or more substantial flaws that I hope will be corrected if they get far enough for people to be taking them seriously as legislation, as laws. First, each of them has a spending limit. Spending limits have been fatal flaws in the presidential system and in the many states that have them. Under constitutional law, you can't force a candidate into a system. And if the candidate looks at opponents who are not participating, or looks at independent spending that's going to hurt, or looks at spending that isn't quite defined as independent spending because the Supreme Court protects it as not being political speech, but it's still directed against the candidate, such as so-and-so is lousy on the issues, write to him or her and say so. That candidate has to worry about countering the money, countering that, and no candidate I'm aware of is prepared to commit political suicide for the sake of public money. Many states have tried to respond to that problem by giving compensation money, extra money. But a couple of recent court decisions throws that into constitutional question, first of all. And second, it really can't deal with this issue speech that's outside the definitions of election law. But I think there's a more fundamental issue here than these ones about loopholes and people getting around them. I think the bigger question that Tom Gaze alluded to earlier is what's the real purpose of the spending limit? I understand that you want to make it attractive for people to get into a race. People need money to start. I understand that you want to reduce the influence of major donors, but what is precisely wrong with allowing unlimited spending of money that comes in amounts of, say, $100? Most people don't even become aware of a campaign until late. And what's the point of turning them off? Small contributions fuel volunteer activity and vice versa. I think this is good for democracy, not bad. that, I think, is the main problem with the matching fund bill, the assembly bill. The clean money bill is basically the same problem with a twist. Clean money gives you a flat grant early, and then there's no private money. Again, I think it's the same problem. You don't have the ability to stimulate people through a small $25 or $100 contribution to get in, to buy in, and to participate in a way that I think is helpful. Because of the complete absence of even small contributions in the classic old-style clean money systems, I tend to be a fan of matching fund systems. But clean money advocates can improve their product by something that involves hybrids. And there is a draft hybrid in New York that starts off with matching funds and then goes to flat grant. In my view, that basically gets it backwards. I think there are two new bills out on the federal level that I think are worth studying, worth looking at for people who like the clean money approach. They both would start off with qualifying grants, as everybody does, then go to a flat grant, then after that, the matching funds come after, and they're multiple match for small contributions. And then in the end, when you've reached a certain maximum amount of public funds, they say at this point, candidates ought to be able to take care of themselves. So they allow both the presidential bill that Senator Feingold is about to introduce and the congressional bill that Senator Durbin has introduced. They both allow unlimited spending from small contributions. In the Durbin case, contributions up to $100, and what's the presidential? It'll probably be $200. To my mind, both of those federal bills involve an intellectual paradigm shift. Instead of stopping and restricting, in both of them, the new emphasis is on empowering and enabling. That new emphasis has been energized by the internet and by small donors, but I am persuaded the technology still needs to be supplemented by policy. Many policies, as I've said, will help us get to where we want to go. But the fascinating point is that so many in the policy community are rethinking the destination. I think that is a welcome change. Legislative majorities are not going to come easily in this area in the short term, but I do look forward to where the new paradigm may take us all in the end.